Ikaw, Kurt, kamusta sa life?
Mute siya, ma'am.
Hoy,
Ayun.
pwede kaya kayo kung mga unmute, ilagay nyo dun sa baba, unmute ka, Nern. Uy,
Ayun, ma'am.
mag-unmute kayo, guys.
Si Ma'am Suzy. Kuwan siya, registered psychologist din.
Nakita ko nga, pero hindi siya familiar sa akin. Sa Manila ata siya?
Yes, ma'am, Manila. Tapos may
okay.
nakatagpo atang Ateneo po ata doon sa gilid.
Okay.
Siguro nagka-conduct rin po siguro ng mga seminars, ganun.
Okay. Pero doctor siya, no? Dami niyang pinagagawa sa buhay niya. I think she's a medical, ba?
Candidate po ata, ma'am, for PhD.
Okay.
Kasi
So, hindi medical doctor?
Hindi po ata, ma'am.
Okay,
PhD lang po ata
Akala ko medical doctor siya, kaya sabi ko, baka psychiatrist yung kasama ko.
Psychologist.
Asan na si Abby? Hoy, CJ. Dapat kasi yung dry run natin, 7, para yung kwentuhan natin, 40 minutes. Ha? O kaya nga, di mo ko dinamay. Kanina pa kita tinatanong, nag-aantay ako ng message. Tapos hindi mo ko in-accept dun sa meeting. Dito, yung clinic ko yung link kanina pa, tapos meeting is in progress. O kaya nga, dapat pag ganito, next time, 1 hour yung kwentuhan, ganun. Oo nga, pampalubag loob, pampabawas ka ba, ganun.
5 minutes lang.
5 minutes, tapos tignan mo, wala pa tayong practice. Galing.
Mag-intermission daw kayo, ma'am.
Hindi, ikaw Si Kurt, pag intermission ninyo, pakantay niya Let It Go.
Yes, Kurt.
Haha. Na-miss ko kayo, guys.
Yes, ma'am.
Ang alam ko lang tumaba si CJ. Yun lang alam ko. Yun lang yung balitang
Myra. How are you doing po?
I'm doing
Good evening,
okay.
everybody.
And
Good
so,
evening
musta po kayo,
po.
ma'am? Ayan, okay. So, all right. We will now begin this session. So, once again, a pleasant evening to everyone online. Welcome to this remarkable and momentous webinar entitled Establishing Psychological Resilience During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Of course, this webinar mostly is engaged to students and teachers. So, here to discuss and enlighten us with their staggering words of advice, allow me to introduce our distinguished speakers. So here we have Ma'am Suzy. So kaway-kaway po tayo, ma'am. Ayan, si Ma'am Suzy. So yes, she has a master's degree in business and management, a registered psychologist, and of course, a candidate for PhD. She is also an inspiring and highly respectable life and career strategist, and with a specialization for leadership, trauma, recovery, and personal growth. Ayan. And also, we have Ma'am Myra. So, kaway-kaway po
Hi.
tayo.
Good evening,
Ayan.
guys.
Ayan. So, good evening po, ma'am. So, she is a psychometrician and a registered psychologist as well. And of course, she is also a competent and well-organized instructor at the University of the Cordilleras. Ayan, so good evening po sa ating lahat. And by the way, for our viewers, feel free to type your messages in the comments tab for any concerns or questions for our speakers. So I may read them later on, then refer it to our speakers. Ayan, so, right, so let's begin. Ready na po ba tayo, Ma'am Suzy and Ma'am Myra?
Sure.
Okay,
We're
Go ahead.
ready.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay po. All right, so with the first question, let's start with Ma'am Suzy po sa first question. So first things first, how do you associate resilience and mental health? And why is it important for students and teachers to understand such idea, especially in the situation we're experiencing today, ma'am?
So we are looking at the relationship of mental health and resilience as the primary question.
Yes, ma'am.
When we talk about mental health or well-being as part of mental health, it is the concept that combines mental, physical, psychological well-being, and that is the definition of being mentally healthy. Mental health or beings of sound mind requires a strength or a sense of knowing that you are able to go through, or you are able to solve and tackle all the problems in life, or majority of your problems in life as you go through them. And that is what resilience is also. By layman definition, resilience is the ability to bounce back through difficult and challenging situations. In pandemic situations where everything looks bleak and the sense of lack of control is imminent, the challenge now becomes, how do I stay positive? How do I retain or maintain my mental, emotional, physical wellness and psychological wellness if I do not have resilience?
Yes,
If
ma'am.
I do not believe that I can bounce back, and if I do not believe that I have the capacity to get out of this situation and create solutions for myself, then I will become depressed, anxious, which will then lead to feelings of inadequacy and stress, which can then lead to being debilitated or lacking of energy. A lot of our health relates to how healthy our thinking is. And that is why mental health and resiliency are are well, or are predictable, or are well related to each other.
All right. So thank you so much. So much, ma'am. So for Ma'am Myra, so please answer the question as well.
With regard to resiliency, as Ma'am Susie has defined, resiliency is related to the capacity to recover quickly from difficulty, from problems. This would be a sense of flexibility, a sense of toughness and strength, as Ma'am Susie has mentioned. Sa Katagalugan, it would be referred to as katatagan, pagiging matatag, pagiging matibay. So Filipinos are known to be resilient or as pliant compared to a bamboo. So we do not necessarily break, but we do bounce back from our situations. In relation to psychological resilience, this would be our ability that allows us to look at a situation or a difficult situation differently. We have a different perspective about it. And as life presents us with different experiences, we become stronger to adapt to it, and therefore we rise or we bounce back quicker. And in associating resilience and mental health, to add to what Ma'am Susie has mentioned, the strength that we have to adapt to a situation, to come back after a problem or a diversity, this could be a good sign of the way we regulate our emotions. Once we regulate our emotions, we perceive failure as not necessarily failure, but an opportunity to see it as a helpful feedback. So you do not necessarily see na nagkamali pala ako, mali yung ginawa ko. It would be, so ganito pala. Sa susunod, ganito ang gagawin ko. This expresses a difference between resilience and having that strength compared to just complaining or feeling pressured to work on a problem. And therefore, we identify the mistakes that we did. And so if we are faced with a similar situation, not necessarily exactly, we become more confident, we have self-esteem, we have a certain sense of comfort that we can go through that problem, we can pass that problem with grace and also with confidence. So that would be the association. In terms of what we're experiencing today, the pandemic has exposed us to a lot of emotions. And importantly, this is where we as mental health professionals and mental health advocates come in. Mas napapansin ngayon ang role ng psychologists, psychiatrists, and other mental health advocates because of the pandemic. Gaya nga ng isang news article na kumalat last week, if I'm not mistaken, that the next wave of war that we will be facing would not necessarily be a medical war, but a psychological war. It is because our mental health is at stake in a sense. It is nagulo kasi yung sistema natin. Kaya nagkaroon ng problems regarding sadness, dealing with negative emotions. And therefore, understanding resilience is important because we have to step back and to explore our options objectively. And throughout this webinar, I hope that I and Ma'am Susie would explain to you some techniques that you can do and that you can try so that you can also share it to your friends and to your family members. So that would be my answer to your question, James.
Okay, so maraming salamat po, ma'am. And truly, we are truly blessed po for having Ma'am Susie and Ma'am Myra with us today. And to get to answer and know the answers to our questions for today, and knowing some advice or tips to combat the situation we're having today. So thank you so much for that first question, Ma'am Myra and Ma'am Susie. So we will now go to our next question. All right. So in what ways can students improve or manage their emotional well-being? Like, are there methods or practices? So let's begin with Ma'am Susie again. Ma'am Susie.
The coping mechanism of a person is dependent upon the age that he is at. So a coping mechanism for the pandemic of a child would be different from that of a adolescent, different from a young adult, and different from an older person. Such that if when you do have a pandemic and you have a 5-year-old child who cannot conceptualize the idea of stay home because you can get sick, they find that very difficult because their way of learning about the world and making friends is to go and hug their playmates. And all of a sudden, they cannot do that. So, from the concept perspective of do not go out and stay at home and do not hug your friends, it is quite difficult for a child to do. Ergo, the necessity for having age appropriate interventions for the pandemic. So for a child, if it is a kindergarten child, and let's say a grade school until grade 1, grade 2, it is to read to them or to interface with them in ways that they are familiar with. So that is playing games, reading stories, watching cartoons which explain the pandemic to them. In fact, there are books online already that cartoonize the pandemic and how to deal with it. If the child is a teenager or a young adult, again, there is a difference in coping mechanism and coping style based on gender. So the males are manifest through physical activities, and the females manifest through emotional connection. And so if it is emotional connection, then it is to provide materials and to foster to foster through Facebook, perhaps, that having conversations online and keeping touch with your friends online is an important part and is a way of creating resilience. For the males, then it would become stretching, yoga, or home exercises as a manifestation of dealing with the negative energy inside of them. If it were an older person, let's say the college people, the methodology would be different. For the women, the issues would be probably, what about the boyfriend that they're not able to see? What about the nights that they cannot go out anymore? Then the technique would be how to reconnect or engage these relationships in other meaningful forms. And that would be a lot of articles and material and TED Talks talking about how they can introduce humor, companionship, relatability through internet or through social media, rather than all the negative postings on the wall. And finally, if it were an older group, then it would be to provide the type of intellectual, understandable information about the pandemic from sources which are reliable. There.
Okay, ma'am. So if I may add, ma'am, since that there's a difference between gender, age when it comes to their coping mechanisms. So how about for the students who are still trying to figure things out because there's a sudden change from their regular routine? So maybe it comes to their mind that what will I do now? I don't know how to maybe do the things that you referred, ma'am. So what are the other things perhaps that these students or maybe teachers can do to overcome this particular problem?
Sorry, I'm not clear on the question.
Oh,
Could you repeat that, please?
yes, ma'am. So you mentioned, ma'am, that there are many ways for students of different gender or men and women with different age for how they cope with things so they can overcome such problems. So for other people who are still trying to figure things out, they don't know what to start first or what to begin with. So what can you advise them to help them realize the things that they can do or they may do? Yes, ma'am.
So if the new normal, for example,
Mm-mm.
is taking the online classes and doing assignments
Yes.
and doing group work,
Mm-mm.
and the methodology now is that maybe they cannot meet together, they cannot meet together, or the classes need to be taught in a different format. then what are interventions that the school can do in order to help them interface into that new workspace, for example, or how to make how to engage the students in schoolwork if they are resistant to learning because it is now an online concept. Then it becomes the teacher's perspective to provide reading material as well as interactive material which are web-based as well, and not only stick to their own curriculum or their own data, and to refer to the different sources of information in order to provide their curriculum. If the issue is they don't know how to deal with their emotions because all of a sudden they cannot go out and they cannot go with their friends anymore and interact with their friends, then the direction is for the parent is to guide that information and continue to talk to their teenager or their child on what are the opportunities or what are the more productive ways of coping. The initial reaction of a child would be to do gaming or to do media. It is tantamount now to the parent to tell the child these are to retrain an attitude and behavior that now changes the duty of the parent. So it is to regulate, for example, social media, and to drive the children towards information which is reliable. So rather than spending time looking at lewd humor or unkind words, then it is toward the parent can direct them towards websites, scientific websites that can talk about the pandemic and provide information, as well as TED Talks, which will show a lot of coping mechanisms that they can do. So it's a lot of re-education.
All right. So thank you so much, ma'am. And I hope our audience are listing down notes and taking down notes so they can share it with their friends and or children to help them cope with this problem that they might be having. All right. So let's have Ma'am Myra's answers. So if I may repeat the question. So in what ways can students improve or manage their emotional well-being? So are there methods or practices, Ma'am Myra?
Okay. I appreciate Ma'am Susie's answer regarding the age groups, because my answer will be more of a general perspective in relation to students. I highlighted two practices, but I'll go to the coping mechanisms later. Two practices would be: first is mindfulness. I focus more on high school and college students, ma'am. So it's good that you introduce the elementary and the preschoolers. So for high schoolers and also college students and other adults in general, mindfulness allows you to recognize your feelings and your thoughts at that moment. So once you recognize your feelings and your thought, you become aware of what is happening inside of you and also outside of you. Now, once you recognize your feelings, especially giving it a name, for example, I feel sad at this moment. And then you go to the next question. Why do I feel sad? What makes me feel sad? Now, if you go to questions and you still have an answer, you reach a point where you have to decide, what do I do to make this feeling transform into a more comfortable one? For example, I don't like to be this sad anymore. So what should I do? Now you explore a lot of options. You try the activities that you have done before that made you feel happier, that made you feel comfortable. But sometimes these things that you have done before may not necessarily be the same. Because this does not have the same effect, because as Ma'am Susie has mentioned, we are entering a new normal, a new kind of normal. And the coping mechanisms that you have made or that you have done before may not necessarily be relevant or may not necessarily be effective to you right now. So, for example, before you did not consider talking to a psychologist, you have not considered talking to a psychiatrist even or having a conversation online. But right now, since there is social distancing, this would get you to a point that, bakit hindi ko subukan? Mag-message kaya ako sa psychologist? Mag-message kaya ako sa isang clinic, 'di ba? Before it was medyo stigma. Ang laki pa rin kasi ng stigma, and I and Ma'am Suzy are here today to kind of lessen that stigma that we are people whom you can talk to anything about. So, pwede nyo kaming bigyan ng hugot, okay? Pwede nyo kaming kwentuhan ng kahit na ano. And we are willing to help people who are also willing to help themselves. And the second point I would want to make is gratitude. So, especially in these times, there are things that we have not really noticed before that right now you seem to pay more attention to. So you become more, what do you call this, grateful for the people that you have met, for the conversations that you have with these people, for the things in your house that you have not necessarily given importance to. For example, your chairs, your tables, your bed. Sometimes you do not even say thank you that you're breathing and that you're capable of seeing, of hearing, of tasting, of all these things. So mindfulness and gratitude would be two practices that could regulate emotional well-being. In terms of routine, as Ma'am Suzy has mentioned, online classes would be the new norm for students. And although it is very difficult to establish a routine and it's very crazy and chaotic, you may feel overwhelmed. How do I do this? I do not have the resources. The question regarding resources would be another matter. But in terms of those who have access to resources, creating a routine regarding your online classes must be in partnership with your teachers, with the school administration, as Ma'am Suzy has mentioned. Teachers and administrations of schools and generally the entire educational department would play a big role into how our students could adjust, because their routine can only be personalized to a level where they get creative regarding their day. For example, I will have 6 hours, 7 hours of sleep. Noon, 2 oras ka lang natutulog dahil sa projects, dahil sa assignments. Ngayon, you have time to modify that. Noon, once a day ka lang kumakain. Ngayon, you have to regulate it to 3 times a day. Paminsan, may merienda pa. Actually, madalas may merienda pa. And also include your hygiene, include your hobbies that you have forgotten, include things that you would want to do. You can still put a routine into your day because it gives you stability. It gives you a sense of control. However, in terms of routine for classes, for education, it would be a partnership, as Ma'am Suzy and I would agree that the schools and teachers would really play a role into how our students would learn given this new normal. So that would be my take on that.
All right. So thank you so much, Ma'am Myra. And once again, may I remind our viewers, you may ask questions in the comments tab. So I may refer your questions to our speakers. Ayan. So thank you po, Ma'am Myra. So we now proceed to our next question. So what are the things or ways that can help students and teachers develop a strong mindset? And is it true that it's essential for having a healthy self-esteem? All right, so let's go with Ma'am Suzy.
Self-esteem is related to resilience, because it is not the same, but it can be related to, because how you see yourself and how you regard yourself and treat yourself in times of pandemic, the levels of resilience you have and the levels which is developed by how you treat yourself, what you say to yourself, and what coping mechanisms you have developed impacts the way you see yourself, which now impacts your self-esteem. So that is the link of self-esteem to resilience. Now, the question on the development of resilience is I will just mention three top of mind. The first is the negative thoughts you say to yourself, the thoughts that you say to yourself. What do you say to yourself when you don't get the rice cooked properly? Or you cannot work the same number of hours? Or somehow you have to read a document over and over and over again before you get it. If your track is, ang bobo mo naman, ang hina mo naman, kasimple-simple naman, how come you cannot get it? Your belief in self will go down, and the way you see yourself and your self-image and self-worth can go down. So one thing to change is the language by which you address yourself. The second is the practice of self-control, the practice of control. If you keep blaming what is going on with you and your inability to do certain things to the outside forces, like because the cat ate my homework, or because it's too hot, or because I just can't seem to understand the internet and how it moves, then your sense of capability and mastery of task is now impacted. To focus it into something that you can control, which is, I may not understand how to do the online class, I will find the solution by asking my classmates. The cat did not, I cannot concentrate as much. Yes, I understand that the pandemic has created a sense of generalized anxiety among everybody. And I recognize that impact, and therefore I know that I will have to work a little bit more hours because of the situation and not because of my incapacity. The third would now be healthy practices and healthy exercises. The minute you do exercising, then your endorphin levels, and you laugh yoga, for example, your endorphins go up, your well-being goes up, your hormones go up, your stress-filled, anxiety-driven hormones go down. Therefore, you can now regulate your emotions better. And when you're able to, when you're not regulated, when your emotions are more regulated and you are in a more positive space, then your ability to see the better things in life, like Myra was saying, just to recognize the good things, to be grateful for things, now becomes more possible.
All right.
That's it.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Okay, so let's go with Ma'am Myra. So for our question, if I were to repeat, what are the things or ways that can help students develop a strong mindset as well as teachers? And is it true that it's essential for having a healthy self-esteem? So, Ma'am Myra.
Yes, regarding the concept of strong mindset, since we are in the topic of resilience, I would like to rephrase it to resilient mindset. Resilient mindset would be a more efficient term because when you say strong, pwede kasi mag-break ang strong. Resilient would be, as we have talked about with Ma'am Susie kanina, na lagpasan mo yung isang challenge, when you experience it again, mas confident ka na sa sarili mo. And it gives you a certain strength, a certain level of comfort that you can go through a series of challenges, a series of difficulties. In terms of developing a resilient mindset, I and along with our other psychologists at PsychStart, Psychological Academic and Art Services Clinic, we use this framework in terms of coping. So there are also three things, but I would just give you the general definitions. The first thing is to reduce the flame. So comparing ourselves to a kettle exposed to an environment, we sometimes have the capacity to reduce the flame. However, during this time, hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na umalis ka na COVID, bumalik ka na lang ulit. So it's not necessarily possible. But second is release tension. So this is what I and Ma'am Susie have been talking about kanina, that you have to find ways of how you can manage your emotions. In terms of releasing tension, this could be talking to somebody, physical exercise, creative output. So this would be the subcontext. And a lot of levels pa dun sa baba ng yon. Talking to somebody, not necessarily a psychologist, your parents, your siblings, physical exercise, sabi ni ma'am, yoga, ayan po. Marami pong views ngayon ng mga yoga videos dahil sa pandemic and exercise videos dahil sa pandemic, and also creative output. So writing, singing, having a lot of outlets in terms of social media. Maraming platforms ngayon ang tumaas din ng subscribers ang dahil sa pandemic. So this would be your second. And the last is to remove yourself temporarily from the environment. If ever your mindset is affected by the people inside your household or the people you're currently with at this moment, removing yourself from them, for example, taking a nap, taking a break, staying inside your room for a moment or for a while so that your feelings would subside before talking to them. Para hindi masyadong mapuno yung threshold mo. And in terms of self-esteem, I like what Ma'am Suzy has mentioned kanina. It starts really with your thoughts. I'm not sure kung sino yung philosopher na yon, but your thoughts become your action, your words become your actions. It's a long thread, but essentially your thoughts become your destiny. And therefore, in terms of resilience, once you change the way you speak to yourself, for example, I'm not good enough, I'm not perfect, nobody is, I can do my best. If you convert these small words into better words and sometimes the best versions that you would want to do, it can really change a lot because believing in something would translate into your words and essentially makikita ng mga tao sa'yo, ano nagbago? Is it from positive to negative, negative to positive? And therefore, these are things that you have control over. And also, a healthy self-esteem allows you to be more efficient. So sa ngayon, ang dami kasi nating roles eh. Besides this talk having to call this priorities to students or being a priority to students and teachers, you also have a role to be a child or to be a daughter, to be a son, to be a parent for some teachers, to be a sibling, to be a teacher, to be a student. So sa dami ng roles mo, if you do not have a healthy self-esteem, lahat yan maapektuhan. And in the earlier statement of Ma'am Suzy, resilience covers everything from mental to emotional to psychological to physical fitness, lahat yan kasama sa self-esteem mo. So once na-acknowledge mo that there are times na kailangan mo ng tulong, okay, we are here to help you, somebody's willing to help as long as you ask for it. So, yun naman yung sa akin in terms of self-esteem. That highlighting mental health is important because collective ang tingin natin sa self-esteem. Hindi lang siya confidence sa pananalita, sa pagdadala, hindi siya confidence sa kung ano iniisip mo. It's your entire or a holistic well-being, as Ma'am Susie has mentioned kanina. So, yun. Back to you, James.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you po ma'am Myra, ma'am Suzy. All right, so my first question po tayo from our audience, if I may read, na-replace lang po ng onte. So,
Yeah.
in coping with this pandemic, what related activities for children 12 years old below can do online? So, ulitin ko po. So, in coping with this pandemic, what related activities for children 12 years old below can do online for them to establish psychological resilience by themselves? Ayan, so magsimula po tayo kay Ma'am Suzy. Ayan.
There are many websites, for example, Learning Academy, Khan Academy, for example, which has stuff for children, that classes for children. That's one of them. A lot of schools now already have curriculum, play curriculum that they have placed online. That is also a reference. I'm sure Hani Karandang in her play therapy has offered something as well online to provide the children with activities that they can do. Now, those are the ones that are online. I think a lot of times people or parents do not appreciate the value of the little games that we used to play before the internet was there. The little games of tumbang preso, patintero. The beauty of those games has got to do with learning how to be with other people, learning how to play a team sport, learning to get along, learning to fail, learning to give the other person a chance. This is now the opportunity. There is nothing that can replace human interaction and relationship in the internet, because human relationship and interaction need to be face to face. Ergo, it is now the movement from online also to physically being there and developing physical crafts and skills and games that they thought were unnecessary or backward, if you may, than before. That is one alternative. Play is the way that a child expresses his executive functions in a manner and in a manner and a discipline that is age appropriate to where he is. Ergo, playing dal-dal and luto-luto for a 5 or 10-year-old is equal to an operation manager's creation of an operation guideline. It is exactly the same because it's the way the child manifests his executive functioning and develops his way of doing things that are important to him. Over to Myra. Over to you.
Okay. Myra?
Thank you po. With regard to Ma'am Suzy highlighting play, no, I think it's really important for parents especially. Gaya nga po na nasabi sa isang seminar recently, ngayon lang po kasi talaga tayo nagkaroon ng time, 24 hours, 7 days a week na magkakasama tayo sa bahay. And the importance of really the old games, I think there are some videos that are going viral na binabalik nga nila yung mga dati nating laro. And I think it's also important because it is culturally significant. Kahit na may online games tayo, iba pa rin ang laro ng Pilipino eh. Babalik at babalik kayo sa mga throwback, ganyan. And we hope na not necessarily specifying our ages, but we have experienced these types of games and we have experienced fun games na yung mga bata ngayon, hindi nila gets. Kumbaga, they do not really understand because hindi nila alam paano maglaro ng rubber band, ng text, ng bato,
Garter.
ng garter, Chinese garter. So it's really a good intervention as Ma'am Suzy has mentioned. Also, I think it is also important for parents not to compare your child to others. There is a tendency po kasi na, bakit yung anak ng kapitbahay or anak ni ganito, mas magaling siyang maging techie or mas marunong siyang mag-Photoshop. Like, you talk about children right now having a lot of skills that are learned by us young adults in a more longer time, no? Do not compare your child because they might have different talents that you have not yet explored because you do not necessarily spend the same amount of time you did before. So this is the new normal for a Filipino family. You have to acknowledge that they have talents, they have skills, they have hobbies that you might not have seen before. But ngayon, lumalabas na. Hindi mo pala alam, marunong mag-drawing yung anak mo, marunong magsulat yung anak mo, marunong siyang gumawa ng plano or ng, you might eventually realize the dreams that your children have because of the time you spend with them. Another important point is assistance. I don't think that at the age of 12 years old and below that they can do psychological resilience. They can discover psychological resilience on their own. They still need assistance from parents, especially their guardians and other adults. This leads me to an important point where the adults should have a common objective. If it is to teach children, for example, empathy, or as Ma'am Susan has mentioned, interaction, allowing children to express themselves the way that they would want to, not necessarily, ay, pagagalitan ko siya kasi ganito, may nasabi siyang masama or may ginawa siyang masama. You have to also learn how to communicate with children because, nga po ngayon na we will pay double the tuition fee for teachers the next time that they encounter teachers because ngayon lang nila naiintindihan na mahirap palang maging guro, especially sa mga bata, diba? So I think Ma'am Susie would add to that na it's really very difficult for we now acknowledge the teachers' effort in the classroom and even outside the classroom as they become the second parents to these children. So balik ko lang kay Ma'am Susie saglit kasi I know she has something to add. Thank you, Ma'am.
Oh, I thought that was a perfect answer. I thought it was perfect, and what I've seen in my practice right now, precisely because of the pandemic, if the family is not strong going into the pandemic, the amount of pressure now is excessive. And so the tempers are higher, the stress factor is higher, the tensions are higher. If we realize that and we recognize that it is not because Junior mistakenly threw the spaghetti on the floor, but really it's because I'm worried that I don't know whether I'm going to have another job or I still have my job or not. That awareness will help you put yourself in place before you say something extremely hurtful to Junior. So if the family is going to the pandemic, wherein it is weak, it will be completely challenged because all families now are challenged by this pandemic.
Yes, po. All right. So thank you po, Ma'am Susie and Ma'am Myra. So before beyond 40 minutes. So mag-short commercial lang po tayo. All right. So we'll be right back po.
Oh my God.
Thank God, tapos na tayo. Oh my
True.
God, oh my God. Truly,
Okay.
truly.
All right. So live na po ulit tayo. All right. So your cue, Sir CJ. All right, so welcome back, dear viewers. And once again, this is our seminar regarding the establishing psychological resilience during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so far, we've really received lots of advice from our speakers today, and of course, for our audience. Okay, so for our another question from our audience is that Ito po from Ma'am Karen Doris. Okay, so many are experiencing cabin fever, and there are some who are having difficulty in dealing with it. Someone told me, madali mag-advise, but it's hard to deal things that are happening. So let's begin with Ma'am Susie po.
Cabin fever, madaling mag-advise, pero it's hard to deal with it, is where she left off, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
It is hard to face your own self 24/7. It is hard to face your own sense of insecurity, fear, panic, anxiety, and feel that you cannot control it and you are in a situation or in a place that you cannot run away from it. Yet that is the perfect storm to develop resiliency. Because it's only when you actually face the cabin fever, and understand where your anxiety is coming from, that you will be able to get a handle of yourself and develop that resiliency. Resiliency is not developed on a single situation. It is partly adaptive, meaning according to the situation, and partly grows as life happens. So it adds on. It adds on to further or past learning. So if your strategy in the past before is, when I am upset with my husband, I am going to go out and eat ice cream and talk to my friends, you have actually not solved the problem, because you're upset with your husband is still there. You've just now gained more ice cream and more chismes. So that's not solving the problem. What is exciting about today's pandemic and cabin fever, as what they call it, is you have now to develop your own skills because you cannot escape from it. The ability to learn how to now is the opportunity to learn how to communicate, to learn humility, gratitude, kindness, forgiveness. Cabin fever is simply, I am stuck at home, but it does not mean that there is nothing more I can do. The only thing you cannot do is to get out of the house. However, the human being does not grow only by getting out of the house, but challenging himself mentally, physically, emotionally, psychologically.
All right. Thank you po, Ma'am Susie. So we'll have Ma'am Myra's thoughts. Ma'am Myra.
Regarding Ma'am Susie's answer, I actually wrote it down. It is hard to face your own self 24/7. That's a good quote I would place in my journal, ma'am. Regarding this
Thank
pandemic,
you.
marami po kaming pagdadaldala ni Ma'am Susie after this webinar, but we'll first finish this, no?
Definitely.
So, so for this, it's really difficult to face yourself 24/7. And this pandemic has given us two sides of a pole. The first is the productivity pressure, or pressure to be productive. It is right now that we are faced with posts na, natuto ako magluto, natuto ako maglinis ng bahay, natuto akong ganito, ganyan, ganyan, ganyan. That's one end. But you can also be at the other end. Ngayon, magpapahinga ako. Ngayon, matutulog ako. Because before, wala kang tulog. Before, hindi mo nagagawa yung gusto mong gawin. So these are two poles, and in between that, you can have a lot of gray areas. It is up to you, as Ma'am Susie has mentioned, saan mo ilulugar yung sarili mo. I would just want to go to the other end, the opposite of productivity pressure, maybe this is the universe's way, your God's way, or whoever you would want to assign this chance to, or this opportunity to. Maybe this is the universe's answer to your pagod na ako, ayoko na, pagod na ako sa work, pagod na ako sa school, busy ako. Lagi na lang sila. Kailan naman ako? Lahat ng dramang linya or lahat ng dramatic lines in movies or series na napakinggan mo, maybe now is the time to reflect on it. Bakit ka nga ba pagod? Ano yung kinabisihan mo? nasaan ka nung busy ka. Okay? So ngayon, paano mo aalagaan yung sarili mo? And this is subjective. This is as individual as possible, individual as it can get. So, sometimes for me, giving myself as an example, going off social media once a week is helpful because I relieve myself from stress, especially from posts na sinabi ni Ma'am Suzy kanina. It cannot necessarily give me good feeling. It would not make me feel comfortable. So I have like 1 day off a week for social media because I allow myself to breathe. Na parang wala mo ng bad vibes ngayong linggong to. Okay, this would be a rest for me. I would do everything na gusto ko, but I would just not be on social media. However, some people naman, kailangan everyday silang nasa social media because that is their life. That is where they connect with people, especially pag mag-isa ka sa dorm or sa apartment na abutan ka ng lockdown. You cannot really go off social media kasi that's how you connect to people, your family, your friends. So it depends on the person and also it depends on your situation. So really, resilience right now is a big struggle. However, it is not a struggle that you cannot cope with. It is not a struggle that has a lot of to-do lists. It's really more of a reflection and also an acknowledgement that I need this time for myself and I, or for me and my family to bond. It's a time for me to relax, to sit back and watch the world. It's a time for me to create more moments to look back to once this pandemic is over. So kung dati nakikita lang kayo pagka gabi na or kaya tulog ka na pag dumating si nanay or si tatay, pag dumating yung anak mo galing duty dahil call center, maybe it's time to talk about, anak, kamusta ka na? Ma, dad, kamusta ka na? Usap tayo, 'di ba? Napaka-showbiz pero it's an effective way to increase interaction and communication and essentially building resilience. So there, James.
All right, so thank you po, Ma'am Myra and Ma'am Suzy. And I hope pa rin na nagte-take note po tayong mga viewers ngayon. At marami po talaga tayong matutulungan. And of course, tayo rin po mismo ay natututo dito. Of course, so before we proceed with the conclusion, we'll have our last question. Ayan, so with the current situation of class disruptions among schools and universities, unfortunately, there are also a number of students stranded in their dorms. So, well, I have this friend, actually, my friend, who's experiencing such difficult times. She said that the ECQ really hit her mental health. She said that she misses her classes, the subjects, her instructors, and so on. And she's really expecting to graduate very soon. She added she's already delayed for graduation, and sometimes she feels quite jealous for her batchmates who already graduated. Now with the ECQ, she's feeling a bit mixed up with stress and losing a bit of inspiration for graduation. So now when we look at the bigger picture, a number of students like her are also feeling the same way, like questions, what will I do now? Or what if I don't graduate on time? So what can you give them? Uh, what can you give them as an advice for them to be uh, encouraged once more? Ma'am Suzy. Ayan.
The science will tell you that your anticipation of what people are thinking, or your anticipation of the effect of failure, or the effect of not matching up, or not getting a job, or not graduating on time, your anticipation of emotion is always, or almost always, overrated. Meaning to say, if you feel that uh, when I see my friend, when I do not pass the exam, I will feel 100% bad, and I'm never going to be able to stand up in front of my friends. I will feel like such a loser. That is your thinking, that when I go to the party and I see my friends and they're going to tell me what happened, and I will feel like a complete loser because I would not have been able to graduate, and I would not be able to get a job, and therefore I'm going to be stuck home. What a complete loser I am. The science will tell you, however, that a human being or a person's anticipation of feeling bad is overrated, meaning it is much more than they really feel when the event happens. So you think that you're going to feel like a complete louse and you're going to feel that way for 1 year. When it really happens, the science will tell you that you will not feel 100% bad, maybe 60, maybe 70, 80%, 50, 40% bad, and then that you'll be able to stand up after a few months. So the catastrophic thinking is what we just need to manage, because the science will tell you that we will not feel that bad. And we just feel that bad right now because we are in the middle of feeling the desolation in the dorm room. However, precisely because it is the situation of being in the dorm room that creates a new reality for you, once it normalizes and you feel more positive, then you will not feel that same level of desperation or desolation. So the way to come about it, therefore, is to understand that this is my mind telling me that this is what I believe I will feel because of the way I think or I see the situation right now. But I also recognize that when the situation changes, my feelings about this will also change. And since I know that, then rather than thinking ahead of what everybody is going to say and how I'm going to feel, then I might focus, which is what Myra was saying, in the here and now, and manage through meditation and manage to stay within the present moment. So rather than thinking, oh my God, I will not graduate on time, it is the situation has created that I will not graduate on time. However, it does not mean that I am a loser. Because the end goal or the unsaid conversation in the mind of not graduating on time is, kawawa naman ako, naiwanan ako, siguro ako yung may problema. Thank you.
Ayan. So thank you, ma'am. Ayan. So for Ma'am Myra, ma'am, what are your takings from this? Ma'am Myra?
Regarding what Mom has mentioned, catastrophic thinking really is very difficult to manage. Tatagalogin ko na lang yung sagot ko for this one, no? Because as a former instructor sa UC, I also have students who post on their feed na parang ayaw ata akong pag-graduating ng universe. Baka if the pandemic doesn't kill me, maybe this graduation might kill me. The expectation, yung longing mo sa toga, pagsuot ng toga, sa celebration, sa pagkuha ng diploma, you have a grand picture already. Ang point namin ni Ma'am Suzy is, hindi naman sa hindi yun mangyayari. Yun lang, madedelay lang siya. It's really, we are currently facing a new normal also in the educational system. And it's up to our educational system to decide if our graduation would be online, would be actual graduation na may stage, may hall, may pa-entrada ka pa, di ba? It really depends on how this pandemic will play out. But for now, you can relax, if you are interested to take online classes, to enroll, kasi may recent memo ang CHED na, college and graduate school would have to have online classes for them to continue the school year. If you are interested to do that, then do that. Focus on the here and now so that you do not necessarily increase your anxiety na paano kung ganito, ganyan yung mangyayari. Anticipation makes your expectations really worse, and sometimes immediate gratification. psych students know this, but immediate gratification, sometimes patience really improves your thoughts and your feelings about something. Kasi hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na, oh, graduate ka na, di ba? Wouldn't you want to be that batch na graduate after the pandemic? It's a historical moment. What if you want to think about it that way, di ba? Na parang, ay, hindi kami nabiyayaan ng graduation ng 2019. However, we are the first graduates after the pandemic. Wouldn't that be a good reframed thought of how you see graduation? It might be online, it might be offline, but reframing and reducing catastrophic thinking would be a good practice for you guys. Not only for graduates, but especially in our daily activities now that everyone is still under the experience of lockdown and pandemic. So that would be my answer.
Ayan.
James?
Okay, thank you po ma'am, Ma'am Myra, Ma'am Susie. And if she's here, I'm sure that ma-appreciate niyo po talaga yung mga advice na binigay niyo po. So maraming salamat po ulit Ma'am Myra, Ma'am Susie. So yun na po ang ating seminar. So thank you po very much. So before we end, any inspiring words or conclusion po natin ngayong webinar, Ma'am Susie and Ma'am Myra. So let's start with Ma'am Susie po.
If there is any other help I can give you, if you need references for any of the portions of which I had spoken, please reach me at www.talktosusierojas.com. Thank you.
All right. How about Ma'am Myra po?
Okay, so actually na-anticipate ko na mag-extend tayo dahil sa topic. Pero I really look forward to having more webinars. Sinasabi ko na po kasama si Ma'am Susie. Gagawan po namin ng paraan yan. If it's via IOL Incorporated, why not, But also plugging, I'm currently a part of PsychStart, Psychological, Academic, and Art Services under the direction of Sir Georgette Mondares, and we are offering free psychological services. That would be consultations and sessions during the ECQ. So if you would like to send us a message, I would just like to clarify because we would want to stop and lessen the stigma na kahit na anong problema yan, kahit na actually wala kang gustong pag-usapan, pero kung gusto mong kaming kausapin, okay lang. Talking to a psychologist doesn't make you crazy, okay po? Sa mga parents po na may mga anak na medyo interested makipag-usap sa psychologist, hindi po baliw ang mga anak nyo. You are not crazy for thinking of talking to a psychologist. Wala po kayong tililing. Ano pa ba? Hindi kayo kahihiyan sa pamilya. You are not someone to be ashamed of. You are someone who is worthy. You matter, okay? You deserve the love and care that you give the world. And therefore, if you would want to help yourself, allow us to help you. So send us a message via Ma'am Susie or via our clinic. There are also a lot of clinics open during this ECQ. And thank you for this opportunity to talk about mental health. Thank you, IOL Incorporated.
Thank you. Thank you, IOL.
All right. So thank you po so much, Ma'am Susie and Ma'am Myra, for offering your valuable time to inspire and most importantly, reach out for students, teachers, employees, and everyone, giving advice and tips to be mentally healthy and prepared during this challenging time. All right. So once again, thank you for our audience as well for you have viewed this program. And in case we have any other more programs in the future, we'll be notifying you through our page. And of course, we'll be informing you if we'll be having another fantastic webinar such as this. All right. So once again, thank you po, Ma'am Susie, and thank you po, Ma'am Myra. And this is brought to you by IOL. And thank you for all the viewers as well. Stay home and stay safe. God bless to everyone.